Okay, here we go. So the question is, do you consider yourself Hispanic or Latino? Hispanic or Latinos are the largest underrepresented minority population in the United States, accounting for around 19% of the population right now. Hispanic or Latinos, if you think about it, could be anybody from Cuba, Mexico, Puerto Rico, South Central America, or any other Spanish culture or origin regardless of race, according to the Office of Management and Budget. So how do Hispanic or Latino self-identify? Well, it depends who you ask. The word Hispanic was intended back in 1980 from the census to be the category of linguistically and ethnic heritage, not an official race or is none. So if you might recall, there used to be a category in the census that said, are you Hispanic or Latino, yes or no? And then there was a different question that said, are you white, black, da, 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 and everything else. So Hispanic identify with different racial groups based on that census categories. By 1997, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget issued a directive adding the term Latino to government publications as a result of a resistance to the term Hispanic connection to Spain. Many of the Hispanic community felt that they didn't want to disconnect to Spain as part of the whole history of a whole disconnection with Spain as a colonization. So the term Latino, also because Latin America was more recognized. However, by 2020, according to Gonzalez Berrera, about half of the Hispanic adults said that they often describe themselves by their family country's origin, heritage. Use of the terms as a Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Salvadorian, but other 39% most often describe themselves as Hispanic or Latino. So they, again, that's the question. How do they call themselves? Goes back to, it depends. So as you mentioned in some of the previous presentation, recently the Office of Management and Budget decided to combine everything, all these categories into one section for the purpose of the census. So now when it comes to racial ethnic groups, Hispanic Latinos or Latinos will be part of the whole possible categories that people could identify themselves. So we'll see how people will identify. Now, if you look at the some of the surveys that the Pew Research Center have collected over the year, this is a little bit outdated, this is from 2019. When you ask Latinos how they describe themselves, it depends when it comes to immigration generation. If you look at all this immigrant, all the Hispanic, depending on the country of origin, they say 47% of them identify like that. 39% might identify Hispanic or Latinos, and then 40% identifies American. If they're foreign-born, more likely identified by the country of origin. If they're second generation or third generation, some of that change. If you start looking at those in the United States, it depends the identity based on immigration by generation. You know, whether they're all Hispanic, Spanish-speaking versus they having parents who speak Spanish versus they having more socialization in the United States versus they have a Spanish last name versus they have a cultural celebration that celebrates Hispanic culture versus they're Catholic. I mean, there's all these factors that they might consider why they consider themselves Hispanic or not. So this is not a simple question when it comes to that they consider themselves to be Hispanic or Latino or something else. And then recently, you know, over the last 25 years, this whole term Latinx emerging as an alternative to Hispanic or Latinos. The merger of Latinx coincides with the global movement to introduce these gender-neutral nouns or pronouns into the large language, whose grammar was traditionally used as a male or female construction. According to Novitanen et al. 2020, while 23% of the Hispanic Latino population have heard the term Latinx, only 3% of them use it. So it's all the academic people like us that decided to use Latinx. I don't use it, I don't like it, and don't recognize it myself. Younger people, 18 to 29, were most likely to have heard the term, based on their research, around 42% of them, compared to only 7% of those people older generation, 65 and over, and somewhere in between, you know, in the age group. College graduates were more likely to be aware of the Latinx than those with high school diploma, citing 8% versus 14%, and somewhere in between. So again, once again, we are creating a new term and goes back to how the Latin community or the Hispanic community identify themselves. And then there's another term that most recently people are started to use, Latine. Latine is a gender-neutral term because it's really a Spanish language word. Latinx is not a Spanish language word. Therefore, a lot of the Latino Hispanic community are pushing back because Latinx is not a Spanish word. So it's based on the Spanish letter E, in which they use as a non-gender Spanish word, like the estudiante. Estudiante it could be a male or female student. Latine is a part of the movement to create an inclusive community. It's becoming more of a popular in museums, university campuses, and among researchers and media. However, there's also been a pushback. Some within the community call the use of the word Latinx and Latina as a cultural imperialism. So it goes down to, what do you call people in Latino or Hispanic community? So moving forward, I will say, if we follow the Office of Management and Budget, when we collect data, I guess we will have to go back to the Hispanic or Latino and let people select. When in doubt, I will say, ask the subpopulation which you're working with, how they want to self-identify. And when working with specific subpopulation within the Hispanic or Latino community, you might have to include the country of origin, which might be the most likely what they would like to be recognized, whether they're Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, one of the sub-countries from South America, Central America, and so on. So that's my 5 minutes of DEI for today. Any questions or comments?